For many, this heat, dust, and isolation remain the perception of agriculture. However, in the 21st century, agriculture is an exciting, high-tech sector that feeds the world.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this morning, Dewald? You doing well?
Yeah, we're cupping on. We're doing our thing.
It's a little bit chilly this morning for a spring morning, and that brings us to today's topic. We are going to be talking about frost and frost damage to fresh produce. We've heard anecdotally for a couple of weeks now, 2 to 3 weeks, about people having damage to their young new growth on the deciduous crops. And to tell us a little bit more about this, we've decided to invite a guest, and we've got on our show today, we've got Ebbe Rabie, who is the Managing Director of Price Forbes South Africa. They deal with us every single day as crop insurers. So Ebbe's going to join us in a moment and tell us a little bit more about where we're at with that.
And also, Ebbe was one of our first podcast guests on right in the beginning. So I'll also post a link to that podcast on the comments, and then please go listen to it, because it's a lot more in depth about insurance in general, not just about what we're going to be talking about now.
Good one, Dewald. Yes. Welcome, Ebbe.
Yeah, thank you, Louise. Thank you, Dewald. Nice to be with you guys again, as always.
Yes.
Great to have you. Thank you. So, frost. It's not a 4-letter word, it's a 5-letter word, but it might as well be a 4-letter word. Tell us a little bit about, over to you.
I think the obviously all of us in the Western Cape were aware of that cold spell we had last week or the week before. You know, we had snow back in the Koabokaveld and across the region, but it was really a cold spell, which was, I wouldn't say it's unseasonal, but you know, when we have this spring change of weather scenario, it's always a risk. And you know, so one of my clients said it's probably a 10-year cycle. So, you know, anecdotally, I've heard about 1 million cartons being lost in the Kakamas region due to frost.
Wow, that's shocking.
I've had some clients in the Montague region as well who've lost their stone fruit crops due to frost. So, you know, it really depends on where you are, you know, in terms of your farming operation, you know, and it comes down to how you manage frost as well. You know, you obviously live in the X Valley where people are burning tires and flying helicopters and putting up frost stands and all kinds of things. And frost is very difficult to manage. You know, some of the table grape farmers talk about drip irrigation and micro irrigation, which is the better one. And it seems to be that micro irrigation is something that prevents frost better than drip irrigation. You know, it's changing the humidity of your orchard. I think that's the ultimate thing that you can try and manage your crop and try and prevent damage. But it's one of those losses that, you know, you can't prevent it properly. You can't insure for it at the moment. We're working on some products in the parametric insurance field where we're going to try and get frost cover in the future. South African Insurance Association doesn't allow us to do parametrics yet in South Africa, but it's one of those that we will be looking at into the future. I think it's really difficult to manage. And how do you plan? You know, you forecast 5,000 or 6,000 cartons of table grapes, and suddenly you lose 10, 20, 30% of your crop. You know, you put all the input costs into that already, and you know, it's really a uninsured loss, which is very difficult to control.
Okay, so
have you got any anecdotal or proven stories of how people are managing to control frost? I know, as you just said and explained, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think the chaps and the farmers who are situated in low-lying regions, who are close to, let's call it the river, or where frost obviously drops down to low-lying regions. So some farmers have learned to manage it, and as I said, some of the table grape farmers in the Blowpits region talk about micro irrigation, and that seems to have prevented them from having frost damage, where they've seen farmers around them who don't have micros and are using drip irrigation, where they've just suffered immense damage. If you look at some of the farmers just above the Hex Valley towards Taos River, there's some frost fans that have been erected. I've seen how those have worked in the past successfully, and when the temperature drops below, say, -2 or 3 degrees Celsius, the fans switch on and you can prevent some damage, not everything. I mean, it covers maybe 5 or 6 hectares, maybe not 20 or 30 hectares. So, but again, it comes at an exorbitant expense to go and put up frost fans to try and prevent it. And I've even heard of helicopters being hired to go up and just get the circulation of the air currents flowing.
Yeah,
wow.
we've done work with AGI frost fans. So we've filmed them being installed. We've seen them working, and it's really a fantastic product. And I've seen stuff where Stian has shared about the frost that happened last week in the Hex Valley, and how some of the fans successfully covered 7 hectares in a go. But like I said, it is an expense. But I've also heard of growers who said that they've been able to repay that in 2 seasons just by the savings that they've had.
Absolutely. It's the same philosophy when it comes to something like hail nets. You put up a hail net, yes, maybe to stop the hail, but at the same time, you're creating a better microclimate, you're getting better production, you're stopping sunburn, you're stopping wind damage, you're stopping all other things, and you seem to manage to repay that capex of putting up hail nets or shade cloth or whatever you want to call it, for one reason, but it creates far better microclimates and you get better production. So it seems to pay for itself. So the alternative is for us to create insurance products. If you can't afford the hail nets, then you just insure for hail or wind or something else. And obviously we do a lot of that. We insure a couple of 100 farmers around the country for hail and natural disasters. That's insurable, obviously at a premium. So you must offset the one against the other. Is it cheaper to put up a hail net as opposed to paying an insurance premium and having assessed losses and payouts? That's the catch-22 always for a farmer to make that decision.
Look, like you said, at the moment there isn't a product available for frost. So
yeah, absolutely, there isn't a product. In the past, we used to be able to do kind of revenue insuring products where we had multi-peril frost and floods and all of that insured under income-based policy. That policy is no longer available. Now we have to start thinking out the box. So if you look at, I spoke 2 days ago, I spoke on Addis here about parametric insurance and how it gets used globally to mitigate, let's call it, weather-related risks like frost, like heat damage, any measurable weather risk that you can measure from a weather station or from satellite data. I mean, I've looked at some risks where we go on a parametric basis, where we get satellite data, which is so accurate. We can get data per square meter, for instance. Even in places like the Hex Valley, very accurate, correlates very accurately to long-term yield data, correlates to long-term weather data. And once you have data, you can build a parametric insurance solution which correlates to damage. So if you do have a frost event and the temperature drops below, say, -3 or 4 degrees, that you can then build a product that pays you out for that. You don't need an assessment. It just triggers on the temperature drop. That's when the trigger happens.
So tell me quickly, what is a parametric insurance for somebody that might not know? Like I've got a very brief idea of what it might be. So just quickly explain that to us.
In the first place, it's a non-traditional insurance. So many years ago, in 2001, I structured the first parametric in Africa, which we based it on a test case in the Bokkerveld, where we said if the temperature drops below -4 degrees, that is classified as what we call a cold day, and the probability of you then having frost at -4 is very high. So then we say every day below -4 degrees Celsius gets allocated a rand value. So you can say, if you have -4, how much damage are you going to have at that temperature? So you then, if it does occur, then the insurer would then pay you out, because the trigger was the temperature dropped below -4. The same way you can do for something like excessive rain. So if I'm using the X Valley because, Louise, you come from the valley, you know how it all works.
Yes,
Right?
thank you.
So table grapes is very susceptible to excessive rain damage, right? So if you then say you are packing in the weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you foresee that you're going to do 5 or 10 or 20,000 cartons per week in that period. If you then have a rain event that is in a probability of causing damage of, say, 10 or 20 millimeters of rain, you can't control it. Your probability of getting diseases and botrytis and all kinds of things are going to happen, and you're going to lose volume. Normally, the volume won't be lost in that week that the rain occurred. It will normally be lost in the following week, right? So if you had rain in week 1, you're going to lose crop in week 2 or 3. So what we then say, fine, if the rain goes above 20 millimeters of rain, and can be an accumulation of rain. So we can have 3 days of 10, 20, 30 millimeters of rain, and you know you're going to have damage, right? So we then say, if that trigger event occurred, and you said every week the value of your income for that week or the subsequent week is going to be, say, R1 million, and you would probably lose 50% of your crop, which is then 500,000 rand. So the event is the trigger. In other words, the event occurred. It's measured by the satellite or a Hortec weather station, or whichever independent weather authority gives us the figures that we're working on. So it's not manipulative. You can't manipulate the data. It's not as if you can take somebody with a watering can and fill up a little bucket, right? So it must
take
be
a picture.
It must be data that you can't manipulate. So it's an independent source. We all agree it's an independent source. The insurer agrees. He sits in London or Zurich or wherever he sits. He can see the weather data as well. When that trigger event happens, we've agreed the value that you're going to get paid out at. There's no assessment. The trigger is what happened, and then you would get a payout because you had the loss. So it's a very nice tool. It gets used globally quite a lot at the moment. I can give you an example. For instance, if you take Florida. Now, Florida, you have lots of hurricanes that come through, and they normally get categorized as a hurricane 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right. So at the moment, the way we understand, you can't get hurricane insurance in a state like Florida, as an example. But now you can insure your risk with parametric insurance, because they allow that kind of insurance to get used. If your risk is in that zone where the hurricane came through, it gets categorized as a category 5, then you get, say, a payout of 80% of your insured value. If it's a category 4, you could say 60%, category 3, say 50%. And say if it's a category 6, you know you're going to lose everything, so it'll be 100% payout. So that's the measurement. And the same you can do for earthquakes, for instance. If you're in an earthquake zone and you can't get earthquake insurance, if it's a 5 on the Richter scale, you would get, say, 80% payout. If it's a 4, 40% payout. So that's the parametric. It's a statistic calculation based on a measurable incident. Non-traditional. So we need the Insurance Association in South Africa to approve the product as a insurance-related product that we can sell in South Africa. And at the moment, we don't have that approval yet. And the insurers are working in the background getting it's the association is called SAIA, South African Insurance Association. They have to approve every financial product before we can sell it. Otherwise, we will get fined for marketing something which is not regulated.
Okay, so the $1 million question literally is how much is it going to cost? How does that work for a grower? Does he only insure for that period that there might be damage,
yes.
or is it a monthly thing?
You can. So if you have a farm and you got a 50 or 100-acre farm, and you don't have to go insure everything. You're insuring the financial loss, so you don't have to insure every variety. All you give us is the monetary value of your potential loss due to the weather-related event, be it frost, be it heat wave, be it excessive rain, all these factors which you can't get under traditional insurance, but you can measure it with a weather station or a satellite station. So it really comes down to what is your potential loss. And the premiums is difficult because the premiums are a component of the history of that event having occurred in the past 20 or 30 years. So if it occurs regularly and you want to, if you say, for instance, you want to insure that 5 millimeters of rain, that's going to cause you damage. But every year during weeks 1, 2, and 3, you get 5 millimeters of rain. So the probability of the insurer paying out is going to be 80, 100%. You're going to be paying through your neck for that, right? But we call that a strike. So the further you move away from the strike, the cheaper it becomes. If you then say 50 millimeters of rain is going to be my strike, you pay a lot cheaper because the probability of you getting 50 millimeters of rain in that period is very low, because that gets seen as a anomaly or uitskieter, as they say in Afrikaans. And we had it last year. You remember last year in the Rift Valley, we had those floods, and we had so much rain that came through and caused immense amount of damage. The same with the Orange River. You know, we had lots of rain damage, and you can't insure for that under your traditional. And if we can get the approval to get parametrics as a product, I do think we'll have a huge demand for people taking that. Because you don't have to even be a farmer insuring the parametric. You can be a fruit exporter, for instance. So if you are dependent on fruit coming from a region, you as a fruit exporter can take out the parametric as well, because now your financial loss and viability is dependent on that weather event occurring as well. I mean, you can take a silo operator, for instance, that's dependent on grain from a region. So if that region gets a drought, which is potentially not insurable, I mean, we take the Western Cape where we can't get drought insurance, but if that canola crop gets a drought damage, you can say, well, if during the growing period that the rain is below a certain threshold that is classified as a drought, that silo owner can take out a parametric insurance, or exporters or traders. The industry is so wide, Louise and Dewald. You know, it really comes down to thinking out the box and where you apply it.
Right. So just before we started, we had a very brief chat about what is possibly coming, and what I know a lot of the growers and the farmers and everybody, they do follow the weather channels, but we're going to chat about I just want to share something, and like I've said, I've been trying to get this person to come and chat to us for a very long time. So hopefully he sees this. I'm going to send it to him, that he needs to come and talk about these weather things. And it's a page on Facebook called Landwater. In English, land water. You spell it and say it the same as in Afrikaans. And anyway, he shares very valuable info and satellite pictures of things coming, like the storms that was here the past weekend. He said it's going to be a very massive sea, and well, obviously a lot of people either didn't follow me or didn't listen. So, which is probably the latter. So there's all how the storm swells are moving through the area, snow on the mountains. So it's a very, very informative page to follow, and it posts in Afrikaans and English for those that might be interested, and I'll share this link in the comments also. So do you want me to share your screen?
I think, yeah, obviously people like myself, we have access to quite a lot of data and information and reinsurance websites where they monitor weather patterns. For me, I go the simple route. I look at something like website Windy, which gives me quite accurate information, down to the day or week or a couple of days in advance. So because I specialize in crop insurance, and with crop insurance, if you insured today for hail damage, your cover that you get only incepts after 7 days. So, the insurers don't like to insure you one day today and tomorrow we know it's going to hail. So they take a view, like you would take a view as to what's going to happen in 7 days from now. I mean, if you just look at this page that on Windy, so today is Thursday and it looks pretty, windy. We've got some rain in Stellenbosch, but if you look forward, going to Sunday, we start seeing some thunderstorms occurring down here. Monday looks even worse. If you go down to Barrydale, we're looking at a storm cell brewing there. It's probably going to move across to the Langkloof on Wednesday, potentially. I'll just have a look here. Monday night. I mean, these are areas which are exposed. So you've got early pears which are busy setting. You've got some stone fruit busy setting. So if you have a hailstorm now, you're gonna have a problem. So, and that's only 4 or 5 days from now. So it might just be too late to insure it because maybe only next week Thursday it's clean again. But you're gonna miss this potential loss that you would have had here. That to me is a concern. And how accurate Windy is debatable. But I think historically it tells me we're going to have a big storm cell brewing next week. And that's a concern.
Look, it might not be 100% accurate, but it will give you a good idea. And
yes.
And, again, please correct me if I'm wrong. The insurance companies will look at these things when you come to them afterwards.
They do. I mean, it gives you a good reason to say, look, I have got a risk. If I'm considering to insure my crop, I maybe should have insured it 5 or 6 days ago. In the Langkloof, I've already insured many farmers for their stone fruit and their early pears. So that's already been done. So thank God we've got cover in place for what may happen next week. And the insurers are quite happy to accept that risk. They're long-standing clients, so they're not going to deny you insurance. But I mean, if you come on Monday morning and say you want to insure for hail today, you're not going to get it. Or if it does occur, you won't have any insurance. The policy will only incept 7 days later. And that's I always say, plan ahead. Be like a squirrel and plant your nuts early in the season.
Interesting. I did in 2018. I was in the Langkloof and did quite a number of interviews with farmers there. And when you drive through the Langkloof now, you see a lot of hail nets. It's an area that has traditionally received a lot of. They tell you stories about hail in that area that makes your hair stand on end. And one of the farmers was telling me that they don't replace as often as a lot of their neighbors or as the tradition is. But when they replace now, they only replace when they replace an orchard, it will have hail net. So I think it's interesting also to put it out there is that we're all seeing agriculture disappearing under netting in various parts, well, actually all over the Western Cape and the rest of the country. But there is a reason why that is done, because as someone says, the farming is it's like the factory without a roof, But now at least with the hail net, you're putting a roof on and there is some form of protection. So I would imagine you're seeing a lot more of that as well, Ebbe.
Absolutely. And, farmers often think, putting up hail nets is their first line of defense, which is fantastic. And it's prevented a tremendous amount of damage to crops in the past and will do so in the future. What obviously I'm in the insurance industry, and we insure hail nets as well, against things that can go wrong. Historically, insurers used to only give fire damage to hail nets, so you can't insure your storm damage to hail nets. So it's a big investment that goes in. You're putting a couple of 100,000 rands per hectare on hail nets, and the insurance industry is also wised up. To get wind damage to hail netting is virtually impossible. What we do, however, and what I have seen, is where some farms in the past have had tremendous amount of wind damage before a hailstorm occurs, where the wind rips the hail nets apart, and then just after that comes the hail. So the first line of defense is now gone. So we've now created some product in the crop insurance market where we can give hail net or hail cover for crops under hail. So it's probably about 2/3 or just more than 50% cheaper than your normal insurance, but it still gives you some cover, some level of cover, which is important.
Okay.
Especially, I've been doing some kiwi crops in Richmond, where they've had hail or windstorms rip their nets apart, and now suddenly they're exposed for the rest of the season. So you can get those products available.
Oh, it makes sense. Very often when a cold front comes, the first thing that hits you is the wind, and as you say, just right there, the wind comes, flattens your nets, and then after that, the hail comes. As they say, it's lekker om te boer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in my 32 years now of doing crop insurance in this country, I think I've seen enough damage to know that you need to plan financially for risk mitigation techniques, and the successful farmers that have taken out crop insurance in the past are still farming. The ones who didn't take out crop insurance are no longer farming. That to me is the concern. You might see it as a grudge purchase, but it's a lot cheaper paying a 2 or 3 or 4% premium on crop insurance than going to the bank and on a bended knee asking for another loan and paying prime plus 1 or 2% to carry on farming.
For sure. What you were saying about parametric insurance, it sounds very interesting. And you were explaining that the processes are happening for it to be introduced into South Africa and used commercially. Is that well underway? Is it something that you see happening soon?
It is. It is already being utilized in the grain industry. There's one company that already does. They don't call it parametrics. They call it grondvog versekering. In other words, it's all based on statistics. And if I can share my screen again and try and get to the website and how they do it. This is very interesting the way they do it. Bear with me 1 second.
Sure.
Because that sounds like a very good solution to explaining. Well, if the tipping event occurs, you will get paid out according to the percentage, and I think that makes it a lot easier than trying to assess the loss and pay on the loss assessment.
Yes. How do I share a second screen?
Okay. Well, just remove this one. Let's just see.
I'll stop sharing. And
there we go.
You add the other one.
If I then share, present.
Technology is always a bit of a challenge. Let's see if we can get this one working.
You there?
But it's been very, very interesting. Okay.
So this company does soil moisture insurance, for instance. So you can, for instance, go and go do a quote. I'm just giving you a live case example. So you can decide where you are in the country. So if you are based in, let's pick an easy vegetable prawn, you're a farmer in Viljoenskroon. The grid lines are 11 kilometers by 11 kilometers. You click your grid line. You can now say whether you want to insure your ground moisture at a certain level, whether it's 40 centimeters or 20 centimeters, understanding that the correlation between grondvog or ground or soil moisture correlates quite well with the production and the yields of crops in that region. So you can see clearly over the last, from 2008 to 2020, what the deviation is. You can see clearly what the claim payout would have been in those periods. You can say the severity over 5 years or 8 years, what would be the severity? You can choose your risk period. This is now 11 October to 30 November. You can choose 11 March to 30 March. You can choose your rand value per hectare. You can say 15,000 rand, say 15,000 rand a hectare. And that it immediately gives you a premium rate as well. And it'll tell you when you would have had payouts at that with these parameters. So
Wow.
yes, this is parametrics, guys. So you can call it what you want. But
so that item is literally live on a website. You can go there.
this is live.
And
This is
so
live.
it just gives you a quote. And then
Yep.
you obviously speak to the broker, and they will set it up and get everything done.
That's
So-
exactly it. So you can play around with your own measurables and deviations. You can decide. You can speculate. You can see how. And this is historical weather data which they've brought into their system.
And where did they get the data? Is it from probes, satellites? What?
No, this would be from recognized Department of Agricultural data. So
Okay.
so it's live, and you can. I think it's brilliant that you can start doing this.
Yes.
If we, and I think the future will be as well, if you can start zooming in and you can say, where's my farm in the country? And you can start saying, okay, that's where I'm farming. My farm is located in this region, and that region will give you maybe a different payout. And it's very accurate. It's fantastic.
Would it be okay for you to share the link? Would it be okay for you to share the link to this website with us,
Yes.
please?
Yes, I will do.
And
We can just put it with the discussion.
it would be nice to have it at the bottom, add to cart, check out, you fill in your details,
Yes.
and you pay with your card, and you don't have to worry about dealing with a broker or somebody again.
Well, this is pretty much broker driven. So we are recognized as a broker for this company. They are part of an insurance company. They write under the license of guardrails. But they've been very innovative in the way they've brought us to the South
Very
African market.
cool to see it like that, and then
Yeah.
you can see basically what are the stats, and covering a risk, and seeing how things have looked before, and
Correct.
you take your chances.
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
I think the information these days that is available to us in South Africa and globally is immense. I mean, I want to show you maybe just maybe another website on South Africa. Sorry, I'm just taking your time here, but it's
No, not at all. It's very interesting.
I think it's important to share this
Very
kind of
important.
information. I must just enter a code here.
Because as you were saying, so often in the agricultural sector, crop insurance is a grudge purchase.
Correct.
But when you need it and you've got it, it can save your business.
So I just need to, so I'm just going to share again. 2 seconds, guys. I'm just
No
getting
worries.
there.
Hope that's not someone phoning you about frost.
No. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I can zoom into South Africa, for instance. I can now say, let's go to streets.
Is this a public accessible website, or is it?
No, it's not. No, it's
Okay.
not. I mean, I'm a subscriber to it, but I can, for instance, go and choose layers for flood zones, for instance. All right, so I can look for hailstorms, and I can look for that gives me South African data, right? So now you can see on your, if you can see, look at the bigger screen there, you can see hail. This is South African hail zones, and you can now, for instance, choose an area in the country where you're located. So you can say, what is serious? The probability of hailstorms is low. If I look at your valley again, let's go zoom into the Hex River Valley. So now you can choose where you're living. So I can see exactly whether you're in a 50-year, 100-year flood zone, or whether you are in a hail zone, right? So this is information which is used on a global scale by the reinsurers to see, how risky is your farm. I can add in layers. That's like phenomenal. I can say winds. Let's take the hailstorm away, and I can say wind zone, and I just delete my flood there. So now I can say, are you in a windy zone? Very low probability of wind.
You must go look in the Brodie River Valley for that.
Yeah,
correct. And you can clearly see there's a low. The minute you go to Worcester, your wind is still low there. But I mean, if you look at, that just gives you a global picture of wind. So if you think about the renewable energy sector, you look at where all the
turbines are.
Okay. They're going to go up into the Karoo in Sutherland. So there's plenty, not windstorm, but they can look at historic events. And I can load every farm data. I can load in here as well. I mean, that's the kind of information we have readily available, and we can go even further. And we can, just going to look at. I can look at climate change. You can look at 3-day precipitation. This is the forecast for weather going forward. How will climate change affect regions, and which is very important to know. 3-day precipitation for the next, what's going to happen? Moderate decrease. That's climate change. So the reinsurers are building modules in the background for the whole world. I mean, I can, for instance, if I just want to go to have a look at a historical earthquake, for instance.
Earthquakes. Wow.
There was a big one in Morocco just like last week or the week before.
Yeah, I can have a look at that now. I can tell you natural hazards. I can have events. So sorry, I'm just playing around here, but it's interesting to see.
Very interesting.
So it's taking a bit of time to load. So if you look at there was an earthquake on the 9th of September. Have a look here. There we can see the earthquake. I mean, these are things which aren't even reported in the media. You can see it was a 6 magnitude earthquake in Indonesia. We can look at the Morocco earthquake. There we can see the impact of the Morocco earthquake. And how it affected the various regions. So it's phenomenal, the amount of information. We can look at flood data. This is a flood somewhere in Japan. This is recently. Tropical cyclones.
Wasn't there a flood in New Zealand,
Greece?
Like also in the last week? Oh, Greece, yes, that's correct. There was one in Greece.
There is one. Sorry. It was one in Greece now. You can see what happened there. Last part of Greece experienced. So it's phenomenal.
It's interesting.
It's very interesting to see how and this is how the reinsurance market looks at you. So you can look historically as well as at the region and say, sorry, I have an event here. Premium. We can look at historical events, for instance, earthquakes, which occurred where. This gives me a good picture of historical events.
Is
now,
this
somebody was
earthquakes?
saying, this is now historical epicenters, earthquakes. People are saying, well, earthquakes don't occur in these regions, but you can see this happened in 2003.
Yeah. Wow, this is incredible information.
It's phenomenal. And you look at South Africa and you zoom down here and you can see, well, we had an earthquake here in 1970. Remember, I was 3 years old.
I do remember some of my earliest childhood memories.
Our house in the Nay Valley was just on that sort of fault line. I mean, we felt it. We had cracks in our home. I mean, that was a 5.7 magnitude earthquake.
Is that the Tulbagh one that destroyed Tulbagh?
That was the Tulbagh one. Yes. You can see where the epicenter was in Tulbagh.
Can I ask you to go and look at New Zealand? It would be interesting to see what New Zealand looks like with the earthquakes.
Yes, I will. But look at the zone. Look at the.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mind blowing.
Wow.
We live in a vicious world. There's your earthquake, New Zealand. That one. This one was in. So there's the big one. 95 was the big one. 7.1.
But just look at that.
Another big one.
Christchurch.
2016 was a 7. There's the big one that occurred there.
My goodness. Well, we could look at this all day.
Welcome
it's
to the
very,
world.
very interesting. Yes, and you know what? As they say in Afrikaans, to measure is to know, om te meet is om te weet. And this obviously is a very important tool for your industry.
No, absolutely. I think, and we can do it. I mean, I can, at a click of a button, I can do a report for anybody in the country or around the world to say, what is your population? What is your vegetation? What is your fire index? What are the risks associated with your operation anywhere in the world? And that's the amazing thing about having access to information and data. As much as people hate sharing data these days, it's a valuable tool. And this is how it gets practically applied. And that's very, very important.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's been incredibly interesting. As you say,
this is going to go onto the podcast list now.
Yes, very, very interesting. And one of the just anecdotal things I've noticed about, we were chatting about it, is that because so many people are trying to get fruit into the market earlier, they are planting earlier and earlier varieties. And sometimes from when bud break was on grapes 30 years ago to when bud break on grapes now, it's 2 to 3 weeks earlier. So you are actually already pushing the limits by trying to do that. So late August, early September, all the way to close to October, it's a very dangerous time particularly for early grapes. And we have heard that there's been quite a lot of damage again, and really thinking of the guys.
Yeah, I think one has to look further than that. I mean, our industry is so interwoven. I mean, we have a symbiotic relationship between farmers, insurers, banks, marketing agents. Everybody is so dependent on what comes off that farm. So the way we communicate with each other, it's also sometimes the wrong message goes out to our markets overseas, where Indeed. I remember many years ago where, there was a massive rain flood damage or excessive rain damage in the Orange River. And the message came through, but South Africa is producing poor quality fruit. And, suddenly the Hex Valley and the Brodie River Valley and even the Berg were affected by prices being reduced because, the perception was South Africa was being hit by excessive rain, which wasn't the truth, So it's how we communicate to the markets as
very important. Very, very important.
Losing 1 or 2 million cartons in one region is not going to kill the industry. So, some industries will make up for it, and the volumes coming from another region will be obviously to the advantage of somebody else. But I do believe people really should start taking care of their risks a bit better, speaking to the likes of ourselves and how we can help them. And remember, my whole philosophy is never to sell insurance. It's really to give advice and try and mitigate risk better. And whether you do it in your own self-insurance structures or whether you buy insurance. Insurance is just one tool. Same with hailnet is another tool. Same with frost fan is another tool. You have to take a holistic approach to managing your risk. Having micros instead of drip, if you think, it might be a bit more expensive, but in the long term, if you are planting early varieties, then you start thinking about your irrigation systems. Those are critical factors.
Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much for joining us. Dewald, anything last from your side?
No, I'm a bit speechless.
Ebbe, thanks so much, and best of luck. And if the parametric insurance becomes a reality, that'll be really good for.
Yes.
You will be the first to know, Louise. I think
fantastic.
If we get it right, it's going to be an advantage to the entire industry. I do believe so.
Fantastic.
Thank you,
Thanks
guys.
So much.
And thank you so much for hosting me.
Okay.
Don't close your video yet. I'm just going to end this, and then we'll thank you off air.
Okay.
Thank you, Ebbe.
Thanks.